Now, I'm going to explain a difference in 3 ways to present your mathematical ideas. Right? Let me clarify this difference on a certain example. Right? So the example is going to be to solve the ordinary differential equation y double prime plus 3y prime plus 2y is 0. And I'm going to repeat the same solution in 3 ways. So the first way is as in my lecture. So suppose that I'm teaching you. So then in my lecture, I'm going to present the solution of this differential equation in the following manner. Right? So suppose that I'm just teaching you. And this is the first time we see a second order linear homogeneous differential equation with constant coefficients. Right? So I'm going to go like this. Look, this is a linear equation with constant coefficients, and we know from the first order differential equations that it is natural to try the exponential function as its solution. Right? So we're going to try y equals e to the RT as the solution, right? And then we are going to substitute it as y. And then if y is in e to the RT, then y prime equals r e to the RT, and y double prime equals r squared e to the RT. And then substituting it to the differential equation, we have r squared e to the RT plus 3r e to the RT plus 2 e to the RT equals 0. Well, but then we can cancel by e to the RT because it's always positive. And the remaining thing is r squared plus 3r plus 2 is 0. Now, for your information, this is called the characteristic equation. Now, so notice that what we have just shown is that a function of the form e to the RT is a solution of the given ordinary differential equation if and only if the number r here is a solution of the corresponding characteristic equation, and the characteristic equation is just an algebraic equation in R. And it is a second order algebraic equation, so we can solve it by finding the discriminant. The discriminant is going to be 3 squared is 9, minus 4 times 2, minus 8, which is 1. So R1 and 2 are minus 3 plus minus square root of 1 over 2, and we get 2 solutions, which are minus 1 and minus 2. So therefore, we see that y equals e to the minus t and y equals e to the minus 2t are solutions of the differential equation. So furthermore, in order to make sure that they are linearly independent, we can compute the Wronskian. So and the Wronskian of these two solutions, e to the minus t, e to the minus 2t, is the determinant of e to the minus t. The first row is just the two functions, and the second row is the derivative. So minus e to the minus t and minus 2 e to the minus 2t. Now, this times this is minus 2 times e to the minus 3t and plus e to the minus 3t. So it is minus e to the minus 3t, which is non-zero. Hence, they are linearly independent. And therefore, the final answer is a linear combination of this. So the answer is that y equals c1 e to the minus t plus c2 e to the minus 2t. Now, notice two things. That when I explain it for the first time, I need to give you some motivation of why things are defined the way they are defined, and I need to provide some extra theory. So I need to explain what a characteristic equation is, and I need to explain that the two solutions that we got in the end are linearly independent. Because the way my lectures are usually designed is that first I present some specific example, and then I introduce the general theorem. So because after this, if it appears in the lecture, then what goes after is going to be a general theorem that in order to solve a linear differential equation like this, we need to write down the corresponding characteristic equation, and then it's going to have two solutions, and these two solutions of the characteristic equation, they're going to give us solutions of the corresponding differential equation, right? So then, in other words, so when I presented this example in the lecture, not only I solve this specific differential equation, but I also give you some bits of generic theory that is later are going to be summarized and put into theorems. But of course, when you solve a similar example in, say, in the midterm test or in homework, you don't need to give me bits of the theory anymore, because I know this theory. You don't have to teach this theory to me. But when I present this example for the first time in my lecture, I have to teach you because you don't know the theory yet. So imagine that how I would present the same example if it were a question in the midterm test. All right, so this was the way to solve this example as in a lecture. So when it appears in a lecture on differential equations for the first time. But what if it is a midterm test? So if it is a midterm test, then of course, if I'm a student in a differential equations class, I'm supposed to have watched this lecture. So I'm supposed to know what the characteristic equation is. So what I do, I right away write down the characteristic equation. R squared plus 3r plus 2 is 0. So then I'm going to solve it. So I'm going to write a discriminant, which is 9 minus 8 is 1. So the solutions are 1, 2 are going to be minus 3 plus minus 1 over 2, which is minus 1 and minus 2. And then I just write down the answer. That the answer is y equals c1 e to the minus t plus c2 e to the minus 2t. And of course, a good habit is to somehow explicitly highlight the answer, so that however reason grades your midterm test paper doesn't have to look for the answer somewhere among the scribbles. Well, the reason is the midterm test. The aim of the midterm test is to check whether you have learned the material, right? So in the midterm test, you need to demonstrate that you have learned the material. So which means you need to show that you know how to solve the question. And by writing this is enough. You don't need to do anything else. So that's the full solution of this question for a midterm test. So that's all you need to do. But we also have homework that you are required to type in LaTeX. And the objective of doing this homework is different. It's not to test your knowledge. To test your knowledge, we have the midterm test. The objective of doing homework is to teach you how to present mathematical ideas. So it's to teach you written communication. And this is probably something very different than what you are used to, because I understand that until now you've been learning how to solve math questions rather than to present the ideas. And presenting these ideas sometimes is even harder than solving the questions. But it is equally important to present your ideas as to actually solve the question. So maybe I'll give you some example. It's like, you know that Leif Erikson discovered America 400 years before Columbus, but no one bothered, and it did not lead to expansion of Europeans into America because he never presented his discovery to the world. And it was only after Christopher Columbus traveled to America in 15th century that Europeans got to know about America and became migrating to America, and then they started these modern countries in America, like the United States, Mexico, and so on. So, but my point being is that Leif Erikson discovered it, but he never presented it to the world. So, and the world just didn't care about his discovery. So, same thing with all ideas. So, it is important not just to solve a question, but also to present it correctly, right? So, which is why in NTU we have these 5 C's, and one of them is communication. And communication means presenting your ideas. So when you work in teams, you do communication within a team. So you present your ideas verbally to your teammates. But at the same time, communication is not limited to verbal communication. So communication includes written communication. And written communication in mathematics means that you need to learn how to present mathematical ideas in the form of a properly typed and nice report. So and this is what we are doing. So by doing this homework, you are learning how to present your ideas in the form of a written report. So when you do your homework, you need to explain mathematical ideas, and you need to kind of and when you explain mathematical ideas, words probably matter more than equations. So it is always important to express your ideas in the form of complete English sentences. So the solution to a homework question should always be a story. So it should be, like a mini essay. So for instance, you cannot just write an equation out of nowhere. You need to explain what it is. So when you type your homework, you need to write the characteristic equation is, and then you write the characteristic equation r squared plus 3r plus 2 is 0. But then this is a quadratic equation, and I know that you learned how to solve quadratic equations in secondary school. So I'm not trying to test your knowledge of whether or not you are able to solve quadratic equations. I know that you know how to do it. So which means you don't have to explicitly write this in the report, in the homework report. So you can just try the answer. So so you can have something like this. So it has 2 distinct real roots, comma, and then you write the real roots. R1 equals -1 and R2 equals -2. So by writing this, you emphasize the fact that it is important to solve the characteristic equation, and it is important that the roots are distinct and real. So in other words, if they were a repeated root, or if they were complex roots, then it probably the answer would have been different. So you don't have to write it down explicitly, to explain details, but at least when you are writing it like this, you kind of communicating the mathematical idea that you have. And then you continue writing with complete sentences. So hence the general solution is y equals c1 e to the minus t plus c2 e to the minus 2t. And this is how you do it when you have to type it. So the difference between this is that you need to write a lot of words, But you can skip some steps of calculation, because if you are on a midterm test, I understand that you are in a hurry, so writing complete sentences, you simply do not have time to do that. On the other hand, if you don't include this step, then it kind of signals to me that if you don't explicitly write all these steps in the workings, then you may have copied your answer from someone else. And by explicitly writing all the steps in the workings in an exam paper, you clearly show that you have solved this question by yourself. While in homework, you are not just allowed, but you are supposed to solve this together, and you have the access to all the tools like Wolfram Alpha and direction field plots and so on and so forth. So in the homework, I cannot guarantee that you are solving the question by yourself, and I'm not trying to. So when you do homework, I'm looking for something different. So I need you to present your mathematical ideas properly in the form of a written report. And by this I mean that you need to write full sentences. You need to explain the logic rather than calculation. But of course, in either case, whether it be in a midterm test or homework, you do not have to repeat the bits of theory that I present in the lecture, because my purpose is different. So my purpose is to teach you. And if I introduce a new concept, then I need to explain the concept to you. I need to explain why this concept is important and what it is linked to and why it even appears. So which is why here I kind of, I write a bit of more details, and which provide us with the motivation to introduce the concept of a characteristic equation. But once you watch the lecture, once you understood it, you don't have to repeat these steps anymore. All right, so I hope it is clear. So now there are 3 different ways to present a math question. So one is when you teach someone else, and then you need to explain the bits of theory. So another is when you are doing a test, an exam, midterm test, or a quiz or something like that. So then you just need to write a lot of steps of calculation. Of course, if the question is on proven, then you need to write some sentences here. But in this case, it's not necessary. And when you write a written report, or a properly typed report, then you need to put it in complete English sentences. And here the logic is more important than calculation. So you can skip some details of calculation. So for example, you can skip how you solve quadratic equations. You can skip integration steps. Like, when you do integration by parts, there is a lot of steps involved. So you can skip that. So you can skip algebraic manipulations. But you need to explicitly explain the logic, and you need to write complete sentences in English, because they explain the logic. So it should be something like this.